Shapiro, joined by my longtime friend, Bryan Kilpatrick, who everyone once thought was my dad amongst the bloggers because we were both just bloggers. And it was the biggest age gap and height difference between two peers, I think, at one point.
I'm not that old. Come on.
Uh, yeah, but you were on the blogging scene, Brian. Come on, like it was me and a bunch of youngsters.
That's true.
You
Yeah,
were.
that's true. That's fair.
Um, Brian ran Purple Row for a long time. He's a big Rockies fan, written for the magazines, done all sorts of different stuff. And importantly for this episode, he lives in Salt Lake City. Big Utah Utes fan, big Utah guy across the board. And you're the first person I thought of with last week's news, and I want to get into that, and we'll talk about Salt Lake City's expansion bid in a little bit. But first, I just kind of want to broach you on where the Rockies are right now. Sitting here on April 20th, they're 5-14. They've lost 8 games in a row. Currently, they're in the middle of the 5th inning against the Phillies, and they're actually winning for once. That Pittsburgh homestand, I guess it was just one series, but that 3-game home series was one of the worst series maybe in Rockies history when you factor in how much they lost by, who it was against, and how few people showed up.
Yeah, they usually wait until August to play this poorly. So that was, you don't see that this early in the season generally when there's still hope and the bullpen's not completely worn out and this half the starting rotation's not injured, but that speaks to the talent level, the depth level of this team, and I just get used to it, man. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. And you did PURPs for a while. You've been all over the prospect scenes. I've been telling people, like, Tovar's a nice prospect. Montero's okay. We'll see what happens there. Veen's going to be a hell of a ball player. I think we all know that. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to everything else, the pitching and the things that will surround those 3 guys, the help is far away. So when you say get used to this, like to me, this isn't even the first year of the window of 100 lost season opportunities for the Rockies, correct?
No. You got this year and next year, and then the year after that, as long as Romo and Veen and those guys kind of start to get acclimated to the big league level, you might see them go on the upswing. But yeah, they are in for a rough couple of years.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, I see at least 100 losses this year and probably next year too, just based on the pitching, which when the Rockies have been their strongest is the pitching, or when they've been their strongest and when maybe they've been kind of a bad team, but the future's kind of bright and things are looking up. It's because they've got some pieces either on the way or currently there working things out. They don't have that, and so that's the biggest thing that tells me that it's going to be a couple years, and even then after that, it's really going to be because they might have some potential impact offensive players that could make things look up for them a little bit. But it's the pitching from now, next year, maybe the year after. It's rough.
And it's funny because if you would have told me in 2016, 2017, what will 2023, 2024, 2025 look like for the Rockies? One, we would have never thought it was possible that the Rockies could lose 100 games because of the Coors Field variance, and we thought we saw some really bad baseball clubs before. 2, we probably wouldn't have been surprised that the Rockies weren't going to be all that great after their contention window, which just closed mostly because of their own doing rather than the projection all the way back then. But what's disappointing to me, Brian, when I look at this era we're in now with the Rockies and we're going to be in for a little while, it sucks because the final era, they didn't even sell out and go all the way for and try to make that push and try to beat the Dodgers because it was under the guise of being continuously competitive and we're going to be good for a long time. So they had some pieces that were interesting that they got no value for that could have helped them at the time. And now they're stuck with nothing still, even though they hung on to the things that they thought were going to propel them through the future.
Yeah, and that's where sometimes I feel bad being too hard on Bill Schmidt because he's not the one who put the Rockies in that position. When Jeff Breidish failed to bolster the roster down the stretch in 2018 when the team could have won a division title, and then everything went to hell immediately after that. That's what caused what we're seeing now, where the Rockies are just kind of having to, as I put it the other day, they have to try to identify these things that are market inefficiencies to get, hopefully hidden gems or decent players on the cheap, where the things they're looking at are market inefficiencies for a reason. And so that's not the answer either, but you can't put a lot of blame on the current baseball operations staff, whatever, for that. But nonetheless, it's really depressing what we're seeing right now. It's it doesn't even seem that long ago, like you said, that they were on the cusp of, potentially being competitive for another 2, 3, maybe 4 years. And that's all just gone by the wayside. And it's one of the quicker downfalls that I can recall seeing in baseball. And, a smart ass might say, were the Rockies ever in a position where you can use the term downfall? But yes, they were. They were a really good team in 2017. They were a really good team in 2018. And just everything that has transpired since then is mind-boggling.
Yeah, I long made the case that 2009 was their best season, but now looking back on it, I think 2018 was the peak of what we've seen out of the Rockies organization to this point. And you talk about how sad it is. Like, you see that there's 18,000 people there, which, by the way, was more than the Avs announced the night before. It just puts into perspective baseball. But you look at that at Coors on a very early season game, and yes, Pittsburgh's not a premier team, and there's all sorts of excuses. But the one thing that wasn't an excuse is the weather was okay. It wasn't that bad. So some of those early season games, it's like, all right, the weather was crap. Like, who's going to that? There are very few reasons to go to Rockies games, and I know, Brian, you haven't been to one yet this year, but the Cardinals series was one of the first home series, so maybe I'm a little skewed, but there's more Nolan jerseys still than any other team player. There is no talk. We had an opening day show on this network where we covered the crap out of it from Coors Field, blah, blah, blah. 3 current players' names were mentioned, and that was it. And I don't want to say that like that's an us problem, because I think to the general fan in Denver and in this region, this team is really anonymous. It's bad. And unlike any other time in Rockies history, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, they're actually uninteresting as well.
Oh yeah, they're bad and they're boring. It's a rough combination. I agree with everything you said there. Just a couple of things to add is, like, number one, I mean, you say it's an anonymous team. They still have Charlie Blackmon, who's probably their best known player. That goes to show you what people, like casual or, serious everyday baseball fans, think of Chris Bryant. It's like, this guy, he was great, really great, as you can certainly attest. One season for the Cubs and won a World Series. But like, that kind of goes to show you that no one thinks that this guy is a superstar who is, should be paid as highly as he is. And, whatever, it ain't my money, as I like to say. They got to spend it somewhere. But another thing to add on top of that too, attendance-wise, is what makes this really bad. They haven't had attendance numbers this poorly since 2005, 2006, early 2007. And what makes this really depressing and concerning, really, to some degree, is those teams were clearly rebuilding. 2005, at least, that was a Todd and the Toddlers team. That team was when Matt Holliday was breaking in, and Brad Hopp and Garrett Atkins and these guys who you would see leading that 2007 team almost to the promised land. This team's not rebuilding. This team has a bloated payroll for the Rockies. It's a bloated payroll. It's old. There's no stars. It's just, totally uninteresting. You nailed it. And that's the concerning part, is this isn't 2005, 2006 where you can see the beginning of something. You can't see that here.
I think they had the ninth or eighth oldest team in Major League Baseball last year, and they got older this year. I don't know what the numbers are on that quite yet. So that's really disconcerting. You mentioned Chris Bryant, and one of the reasons why he signed here supposedly was he was going to be close to Las Vegas, his hometown, which was one of the funniest narratives that emerged from that.
Just a quick jaunt,
Right.
from Vegas to Denver.
And there is now going to be a baseball team in Las Vegas, long rumored, but basically official now. The Oakland A's last night went into a purchasing bid. We're recording this on Thursday, to buy some land in Paradise, Nevada, right outside of Las Vegas, basically across the street from T-Mobile Arena where the Golden Knights play. So basically just off the Strip. This is going to be a huge story in baseball. They, of course, are shockingly the second to last team to add league to add a team in Vegas, because baseball has been very scared of gambling for a long time. The NBA is the most scared of gambling, so we'll see what happens there. But it makes sense. The A's have had a dump for a long time. Sadly, the Giants haven't allowed them to move to San Jose. And Oakland's going to lose their baseball team, just as Kansas City lost the A's, just as Philadelphia lost the A's. This is a nomadic team in Major League Baseball. So, sad situation, no doubt. But it also does clear the pathway for the next incarnation of Major League Baseball, which is expansion. Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, has long said, until we get our arena situations figured out in Oakland and Tampa, we are not expanding. Well, one has been solved overnight. The second, Tampa Bay, looks like it's getting closer to a resolution, with that team continuing to be good in front of fans that are increasingly interested in a new stadium in a state that seemingly will just decide to do anything at the whim. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tampa Bay got a new stadium quickly, which then means within the next 10 years, we're likely looking at 2 Major League Baseball expansion franchises. And last week, Salt Lake City, they submitted a very serious bid. First off, just anything to add from what I said and your reaction to kind of where we are right now in MLB?
I think what you said about the Rays is right. I think ultimately they stay there. So it leaves, it makes sense for baseball to grow to 32 teams. And it caught me by surprise. I knew a few days before the announcement that Salt Lake was going to throw itself into the mix, and it kind of caught me by surprise. There's been ramblings for a while around here about, there's a group of people who want to get together and bring in another major franchise, and I honestly thought it was going to be the NHL. And so the fact that it was Major League Baseball kind of surprised me, but at the same time, it's and I would imagine most people who saw that news are like, what? No, nobody lives in Utah except for Mormons and polygamists and whatever else, what do they got? And people look at the numbers and see that Salt Lake City proper only has 200,000 people. They're probably just wondering, what the hell? How could this place support a major league team? But, the way I would think that would go is how the last couple of expansions went, where MLB went one east, one west. And so you'd think that you have probably Nashville and Montreal on one half of on one side, and probably Portland and Salt Lake City on the other side garnering for a team. And Portland, it's a bigger market. Probably, I would think, more interested in baseball than this area is. So I would be surprised if Salt Lake City got picked over Portland, but, there's a lot of other factors in play, and ultimately it comes down to the money, and pretty much every major player who has money in this area is involved in this coalition. So that's what I find interesting, is that you'd think Salt Lake's a real dark horse. And I think I read something the other day. So, a source close to everything, somebody's source, not my source, let me clarify that, just said I haven't heard Salt Lake in any of these meetings, but it's a relatively new thing. And while they're a dark horse, again, it's all about the money. And if they can get the money together and get the ballpark situation together, and people here want it and are willing to chip in and pay for it, then who knows what'll happen.
And it's funny because this situation has changed, at least in my opinion, since I actually asked you to be on. Initially, what I was thinking is, Major League Baseball's had this issue with Oakland and San Francisco, like I detailed. They've also had that exact same issue in Washington and Baltimore with home plate rights. You own 90 miles out from home plate. That's your territory from your Major League Baseball stadium. And obviously, Salt Lake City is not close to anything, whereas Baltimore, Washington, D.C., that's conflicted. Oakland and San Francisco, that was conflicted. So it would make sense that Major League Baseball maybe would want to not even deal with Portland, which is 190 miles from Seattle. Yes, pretty far, in a baseball community that would love a team and I think would support the heck out of a team. Whereas Salt Lake City, the closest rival they had, at least until last night, was the Rockies. It would now be the Las Vegas Athletics. So I look at Nashville as a very serious bidder, just as I look at Portland as a very serious bidder. I look at Austin as a very serious bidder as well. Then there's the factor of Major League Baseball. Do they want to be the first that toys with Mexico City or Tokyo or something like that? I think that's a little far-fetched, but that's where Major League Baseball is currently. I go through all this, and I think it's important on the Rockies podcast because when Dick Monfort heard that news, he was probably scared to death that Salt Lake City could get a rival team across the Rockies. You know the region well. This would completely split the Rockies' territory, basically.
That's correct, and this market is it's 2.7 million people. I think that the Rockies would automatically lose out on. So that's the Rockies, and to a smaller degree the Diamondbacks, I think, are one of our teams as well that we get some local like cable broadcast rights to.
Yeah, and I just want to cut you off for a second, Brian, because the point is, cutting the rival. Root Sports is broadcasted in Utah. It broadcasts Jazz games, it broadcasts Rockies games, and it broadcasts Golden Knights games. So not like this affects the Vegas getting a baseball team in a way affects the Rockies. But continue, I'm sorry.
How AT&T Sports broadcasts all that stuff, and that network is not on great footing right now. So with the Rockies potentially getting a new TV deal or something, to have to enter some sort of negotiations here pretty soon, losing this market can't be good. And you're right. I think Dick Monfort's probably got to be freaking out a little bit, because you would think that he would be counting on these 2.7 million people in his pitch.
Yeah, and whether it's real numbers or fake, I find interesting. You are a diehard baseball fan that lives in Salt Lake City and became a Rockies fan. And I'm gonna build up to this question. I think you know where it's going, but on the ground there, how many people would switch allegiances to whatever team that would be? And how many of those people would you say are actually driving to the ballpark maybe once a year like you do, taking a pilgrimage? I can't say that word.
Pilgrimage. There you go.
Thank you. To Coors Field. Pilgrimage. How many are watching regularly? How many are buying jerseys? Like, how much of the active Rockies fan base would this slice into?
There's not, based on what I can see, there's not a ton of Rockies fans here. It's mostly Dodgers fans, unfortunately, and you got a lot of Giants fans and Cubs fans. Same type of fan base you have everywhere else, especially because, kind of like Denver, we're starting to become a little bit of a transplant market. That being said, the people who are from here, have spent a lot of time here, they're going to switch allegiances to the local team. I've got no doubt about that. A lot of pride living here, feeling the need to have to defend here all the time. I don't know that it will. I don't know that it's going to answer your question. It's not going to take a huge chunk out of the active, engaged Rockies fan base, but it's more going to be just the potential of the growth of the Rockies fan base that it would take a big chunk out of.
I'll ask you this, and maybe this is an easier question to answer today than it is in 2018. Would you maybe be someone that switches fan bases, particularly with a couple of young kids who are interested in baseball?
Man, there was a time where I would have said no way. In fact, I think I've said this before, and not even that long ago, like a couple years ago. Like, there was a time I would have said no way. I'm stuck with the Rockies for life, and honestly, I probably am. But they're on thin ice, man. That's for sure. The last few years have been rough.
Okay, so very rough. I'm wearing the Rapid shirt. The one rivalry we really have between Salt Lake City and Denver is the Rocky Mountain Cup. These fan bases really care about it. Utah CU has never really taken off. I mean, me and you joke about it. Like, me and you are supposed to hate each other's guts, and me, I don't care. Like, Jakob Pertl, go to hell, I guess. Like, I don't know. Like, so let me ask you this, especially with Salt Lake City getting or Las Vegas getting a baseball team. If Salt Lake City got a team, would they even be rivals with the Rockies, or would maybe a Salt Lake City Las Vegas rivalry develop? I've long thought that the Diamondbacks are actually the Rockies' rivals. That makes sense. I don't know what even makes sense, because the Rockies haven't had a rival, really.
Yeah, it depends on which division they end up in, I guess. If they end up in some form, because I think the divisions will change too, by the way. We didn't touch on this, but if baseball expands, I think we'll be looking at 8 divisions. However that has to work, I don't know. It might require even some teams switching leagues. I don't know how that works. I just think it goes to 8 divisions. So if they're in a division with Vegas, then it's Vegas. If they're in a division with the Rockies, it's probably the Rockies. And I do think in recent years, and in the case of Utah and CU in future years, I think the rivalries are going to heat up a little bit. The one with the Nuggets and Jazz already has a little bit, and the one with CU and Utah. Especially if CU gets a little better, as I'm thinking they will, and especially in football, of course. And what I've kind of already seen, the dismissive comments from Utah fans about Coach Prime's hire at CU, I think that one's going to pick up a little bit of steam. So, I hope that Salt Lake and Denver do become kind of natural sports rivals. I've always thought the two cities, not culturally, but like in every other way, are very similar. Salt Lake's kind of a smaller, much less diverse Denver, but there's a lot of similarities between the two places, and I would love to see a rivalry. But yeah, it just depends on which team a theoretical Salt Lake team would end up in a division with.
It's so funny you said the Jazz and Nuggets, because I don't even think about it, because they've only played once in the playoffs, even though they've been around since the NBA's existence, both of them. And it's just so funny to me that that's never taken off as a rivalry, simply because they've never been good at the same time. But you mentioned the divisions and switching leagues. I think if there does go 32, I think it's 8 and 4, like you said. I think the leagues are just going to be over with. We're going to lose that baseball. They don't seem to care too much about the traditions anymore. And what would be really cool is if we got like a 4 corners division, where it was, Las Vegas, Colorado, Arizona, Salt Lake, all in a division. And then it would make sense to bunch California teams, and then you could go with the northern teams with Seattle and Minnesota, and it kind of works itself out everywhere else. Before I let you go, because where we're at with the Rockies, and it does seem increasingly like the fan base is putting pressure on, has your odds or percentage figure that Dick Monfort will ever sell the Rockies gone up at all recently?
I'm sorry, Jake. Can you repeat that last part?
Has the percentage?
I caught.
Has the odds for Dick Monfort or the Monfort family ever selling the Rockies gone up in the last 6 months?
No, God, no. God, I say that, but then what immediately pops into my head is like, there's almost, I don't know. You know what? Yes, actually it has. And I will tell you why. Okay. It's not going to happen, but that's not your question. Your question have the odds gone up? And the perfect storm of the team being really bad, the fan base actually showing real backlash, I think, for once, and it proving itself out, at least in attendance in the early season. I'm going to put that as a caveat because I do think as the season progresses, the attendance will get better. But that stuff combined with this TV situation, maybe, like, if they have a really hard time negotiating, getting TV money, negotiating some sort of TV contract, I don't know how the hell that's going to look still. There's not been much about it. But there is a perfect confluence of things that tells me that, yes, the odds have gone up. That doesn't mean they're going to sell, but yes, the odds have gone up.
I agree with that. Both from a major league baseball perspective, what's going on in sports, and also what's going on locally and with the Rockies. Kilpatrick, where can they find you? What are you doing for work that they can click on? I know you have occasional appearances on things now.
Yeah, I always flirt with like doing more writing and podcasting and all that type of stuff. We'll see how it goes. But right now, just follow me on Twitter. I'm at the old grizzly bear, but it's spelled kind of weird. So just, I don't know, find it or don't, whatever, it's fine. But I will be sure to let people know if and when I pop up and start doing some stuff again. There's a good possibility.
Awesome. That's going to do it for this episode of Mile High Baseball Podcast with Jake Shapiro. We'll talk to you next Friday at 1, live at 1. Thanks for tuning in.